My offer is this. Nothing.
Hello and welcome to Bite-Sized Spoilers. First of all, I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who watched my video, 12 Facts You Probably Didn't Know About The Godfather. This video is a follow-up and we're gonna cover 12 facts you probably didn't know about The Godfather Part 2. For example, did you know that during production Pacino acted like a diva? Or that Part 2 was almost directed by Scorsese, not Coppola? These are just a few of the facts we cover in this video, so stick around. And if you enjoy it, please give it a like and hit subscribe. Okay, let's get into it. Number 1. The dual timeline narrative was unpopular. The nonlinear narrative structure tells two stories, creating a parallelism between Vito's rise to power and Michael's struggle to hold on to it. In other words, it is both prequel and sequel in one film. The prequel scenes take place between 1901 and 1923, and the sequel scenes take place between 1958 and 1960. This was a unique and ambitious directorial choice by Coppola. In fact, it was so unique at the time that a test screening garnered negative reactions from the audience, who found the parallel narratives confusing. After this screening, the number of transitions back and forth between Vito and Michael was reduced to make the storyline easier to follow. Still, upon release it received mixed reviews, with some critics also finding its structure confusing. However, over time, this style of nonlinear narrative structure has had a lasting impact on filmmaking as a whole, and particularly the crime genre.
Zed's dead, baby. Zed's dead.
Number 2. They made up parts of the story as they went along. Although there are some differences between the book and the first film, the original is based almost entirely on Mario Puzo's 1969 novel. This means there are many burning questions from the first film that can be answered with reference to the source material. For example, does Michael take revenge on Fabrizio? However, this is not the case with the second film. Though Part 2 claims to be based on the same source material, only one chapter from the book was actually adapted for the film. The scenes about Vito's youth and young adulthood were adapted very closely from a 30-page chapter in the novel. These are the only scenes in Part 2 that have any basis in the book. The parallel storyline revolving around Michael and the family in Las Vegas is entirely unique to the film, and there were frequent and heavy rewrites of the sequel scenes throughout production. This means burning questions from Part 2 can't be answered simply by reference to the book. For example, who actually opened the drapes? Number 3. Where the hell is Clemenza? Peter Clemenza was a major presence in the first film. He was mentor to Michael and had some of the most memorable lines in the entire series.
Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
In Part 2, it was supposed to be Clemenza who agrees to testify against the Corleones in the Senate hearings. However, according to Coppola, actor Richard Castellano wanted to write his own lines and also wanted a large salary increase. His unreasonable creative and financial demands made his involvement in Part 2 untenable, and Clemenza was unceremoniously written out of the script with just one quick line.
Heart attack, huh?
No, there was no heart attack.
This short line unintentionally spawned a range of theories about Clemenza's true fate, and I've covered some of those in more detail in another video. Clemenza's character was ultimately replaced by Frankie Pentangeli, played by Michael Gazzo, who was quite rightly nominated for an Oscar for his performance.
Clemenza promised him nothing.
But unfortunately for him, he was up against Niro. Number 4. Coppola likes to keep it in the family. In an interesting parallel to the film's themes of family and succession, Coppola relied on several of his own family members during production. Connie Corleone is played by his sister, Talia Shire, throughout the Godfather series. In the original film she was only paid $1,500 for the role, but for Part 2 she negotiated a $30,000 paycheck, with a $10,000 bonus when box office receipts hit $27.5 million.
That's my girl.
Coppola's father, Carmine Coppola, co-composed the musical score with Nino Roder, for which he received an Oscar for Best Original Score, even though the score was exactly the same as the first film.
Excuse me? A baking powder?
Coppola's daughter, Sofia Coppola, also made an appearance in Part 2. In fact, it wasn't the first time, or unfortunately the last time,
Dad?
Sofia Coppola starred in the Godfather series. In the original film, she plays baby Michael during the baptism scene, and in Part 2 she appears as a girl on the ship that carries Vito to New York.
I couldn't care less about nepotism, but I'm loving the debate.
Number 5. The dedication of Robert De Niro. De Niro is only in the film for 46 minutes, but he went to great lengths to prepare for his role as young Vito. For example, nearly all of the dialogue Vito speaks is in Italian, so he spent 4 months in Sicily learning to speak the dialect fluently so he could portray young Vito convincingly. And his dedication didn't stop there. For some of the later scenes, he also gained weight to better resemble Marlon Brando's version of Vito. Ultimately, his dedication paid off, as De Niro went on to win the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. Even more impressive is that he is one of only 8 actors ever to win an Academy Award for a role primarily in a language other than English.
Salute. Salute.
Number 6. Many of the events in Part 2 are inspired by history. The first film is set to the backdrop of post-war America.
Hey, the war's over. I had to wait for over 2 years for the car to come with stupid wooden bumpers.
Similarly, Part 2 is set to the backdrop of real-life historical events. For example, the Cuban Revolution that brought Fidel Castro to power plays an important role in the narrative of Part 2. Another example is the Senate hearings investigating organized crime. These were inspired by the real-life Kefauver Committee hearings of the 1950s, which aimed to expose and combat the influence of the mafia in the United States. In fact, the character of Senator Pat Geary was inspired by real-life Senator Pat McCarran, who was known for his investigations into alleged communist ties and his anti-immigrant sentiments.
I don't like your kind of people. I don't like to see you come out to this clean country in your oily hair.
Whoa, he'll regret that in the morning. Anyway, the blending of fictional storytelling with real-world events adds a layer of authenticity to Part 2. Number 7. Did they just say the M-word? In the original film, the M-word, mafia, is never spoken because the Italian-American Civil Rights League embargoed it. However, in Part 2 the word mafia is spoken 3 times, all during the Senate hearings.
But these hearings on the mafia.
You are head of the most powerful mafia family in this country.
Whether it is called Mafia or Cosa Nostra?
Following the success of the original film, Coppola and Puzo were able to get away with using the word mafia for a few reasons. Firstly, Joe Colombo Sr., the driving force behind the league's decision to ban the M-word, was shot in the head in 1971, so he had bigger concerns than a movie sequel. Secondly, many league members purportedly liked the original film and thought it portrayed them and their activities sympathetically.
That Italian Americans are among the most loyal, most law-abiding, patriotic, hard-working American citizens in this land.
Number 8. Pacino got what he was worth, but became a diva. When the first film was made, Pacino was not a big name in Hollywood, and Coppola had to fight the execs to get him cast. For the first film, Pacino was paid the grand sum of $25,000, which was not much for a leading role in a major Hollywood film. However, by the time production on Part 2 began, Pacino was a household name. As such, he demanded not only a $500,000 flat fee to return as Michael, but also a 10% share of the total profits for the film. According to some crew journals though, all of this went to his head. He demanded heavy script rewrites before production began, and frequently complained about Coppola's slow directorial pace. In Pacino's defense, The Godfather Part 2 took a whopping 104 days to shoot. Thankfully, Pacino stuck around and gave a career-defining performance in Part 2, and went on to be nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actor in 1975. But in a controversial decision, he ultimately lost out to Art Carney. Number 9. This time Coppola had the power, not Paramount. Coppola had such a bad time making The Godfather that for Part 2 he asked to pick a different director, taking the role of producer for himself. He chose Martin Scorsese, but Paramount rejected this choice, instead giving Coppola a Mercedes-Benz limousine as an incentive to direct the sequel. Ultimately, he agreed to direct it himself, but only under several conditions. Firstly, he stipulated that Robert Evans, Paramount's head of production, had no involvement with Part 2, as they had frequently clashed on the first film. On top of that, he wanted Paramount to finance his film The Conversation, he wanted to direct a production for the San Francisco Opera, he wanted to write the screenplay for The Great Gatsby, and he wanted to do all of this before the release of Part 2. And guess what? He got everything he wanted.
Sam, thank you so much. Thank you.
Number 10. Brando was a no-show. Coppola initially considered bringing Marlon Brando back to play Vito as a young man, convinced that he could play a role of any age. Despite his appearance in the original film, Brando was only 46 years old when he was cast as Vito, and would have only been 48 when Part 2 was cast. However, as Coppola worked on the script, he remembered Robert De Niro's exceptional audition for the role of Sonny in the original film and decided to cast him as young Vito instead. Still, Brando was scheduled to return for a cameo in the dinner table flashback at the end of Part 2, but because of a pay dispute and the way Paramount treated him during the original film, he decided not to show up on the day of filming. This forced Coppola to quickly rewrite the scene so it could be filmed the next day. And while we're on the topic of the flashback scene, here's another interesting fact about it. To return as Sonny just for the flashback, James Caan demanded the same amount of money as he was paid to do the entire first film. What a legend!
Keep your heads up and your assholes puckered.
Number 11. Something doesn't add up. The Godfather Part 2 is renowned for its dedication to historical accuracy. For example, many of the 1901 scenes had to be reshot when a crew member noticed the actors were wearing zippers on their pants. But zippers weren't even invented until 1913. However, there are still a small number of inaccuracies, one of which concerns Vito's timeline. His headstone in the original film states he was born on April 29, 1887. But this conflicts with two elements of the sequel. In the flashback scene at the end of Part 2, Sonny makes reference to the attack on Pearl Harbor being on Vito's birthday.
Dropping bombs in our own backyard on Pop's birthday yet.
They didn't know it was Pop's birthday.
This would suggest that Vito was born on December 7th, not April 29th. Also, on-screen text at the beginning of Part 2 states that Vito's father was killed in 1901 and that Vito was only 9 years old at the time of the funeral. This would suggest that he was born in 1891, not 1887. This is why, if you look at the Godfather wiki page, you will see two birth dates listed. Interesting, right? Number 12. Part 2 enjoyed unprecedented success for a sequel. Before The Godfather, sequels were generally frowned upon from a creative perspective.
By definition alone, they're inferior films.
This all changed with The Godfather Part 2 though, when it became the first sequel to win the Academy Award for Best Picture. To this day, the only other sequel to win Best Picture is The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King.
The ring is mine, Sam!
The Godfather Part 2 also received 5 other Oscars, including Best Director for Francis Ford Coppola, Best Supporting Actor for Robert De Niro, and Best Original Score for Nino Roder and Carmine Coppola. The Godfather Part 2 went on to become the first sequel to be inducted into the National Film Registry in 1993. Not only was Part 2 critically successful, but also commercially, grossing over $57 million domestically during its initial release. It has joined the ranks of a very small group of film series in which the sequel competes with or arguably exceeds the original in terms of quality.
I'll never join you!
That's all for this video. Let me know what you think about these facts in the comments, and why not check out one of my other Godfather videos. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.